Have you ever been alone at home when every little sound feels like a warning? Imagine that creeping feeling turning into a nightmare you can't escape. Tonight, we dive into 5 chilling stories of what happens when being alone isn't the safest place to be. From antique dolls that shouldn't move, to secrets in the attic, and a basement hiding more than just old memories. These stories will leave you questioning if you're truly ever alone. So, turn off the lights and let's begin. My roommate collects antique dolls. I wish she hadn't. I've always hated dolls. Their glassy eyes, frozen smiles, and tiny hands have creeped me out since childhood. But nothing could have prepared me for the night those porcelain nightmares came to life in my own home. My name's Sarah, and I'm 26. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend alone while my roommate visited her parents. I had the whole suburban house to myself. No work, no obligations, just me and my favorite horror movies. Little did I know I was about to star in my own terrifying tale. Friday night started normally enough. I curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, ready to binge watch some classic slashers. As the hours ticked by, my eyelids grew heavy. I must have dozed off sometime after midnight because the next thing I knew, I was jerking awake in complete darkness. The TV had turned itself off, leaving the living room eerily silent. I blinked, trying to adjust to the gloom, when a floorboard creaked upstairs. My heart leaped into my throat. I was alone in the house, wasn't I? I wanted to get up, to investigate, but my body wouldn't respond. It felt like lead weights were pressing down on my chest, my limbs refusing to obey. Sleep paralysis? I'd read about it, but experiencing it firsthand was terrifying beyond words. That's when I saw it. A figure darker than the shadows themselves crept down the stairs. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a marionette controlled by an unseen puppeteer. As it reached the bottom step, my blood ran cold. The thing had no face, just a blank, featureless void where features should have been. I struggled against the invisible force pinning me down, desperate to move, to scream, to do anything. But I was helpless, forced to watch as the faceless entity glided towards me. Suddenly, its head snapped to the side, focusing on something I couldn't see. The room temperature plummeted, and I heard the pitter-patter of tiny feet scampering across the hardwood floor. To my horror, my roommate's collection of antique dolls began appearing from every corner of the room. Their porcelain faces, once inanimate, now twisted into grotesque grins. Their glassy eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence as they surrounded the couch. The faceless figure, my sleep paralysis demon, reached out with impossibly long fingers, gently caressing the dolls' heads. At its touch, they began to grow, their limbs elongating, bodies swelling until they were the size of children. I wanted to squeeze my eyes shut, to wake up from this nightmare, but I couldn't even blink. The demon turned its featureless face towards me, and though it had no mouth, I heard its voice inside my head.
"They've been waiting for you, Sarah,"
it whispered.
"They've been so lonely."
The dolls began to climb onto the couch, their cold porcelain hands grasping at my frozen limbs. I felt their weight pressing down on me, making it even harder to breathe. Their blank eyes stared into mine as their painted smiles grew wider and wider, stretching beyond the limits of their ceramic faces. Just as the first doll leaned in, its cracked lips parting to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth, I managed to wrench myself awake with a blood-curdling scream. I shot up on the couch, gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Sunlight streamed through the windows, revealing an empty, ordinary living room. No demon, no living dolls. Just the usual clutter of a shared house. Shaking, I stumbled to my feet and rushed to check my roommate's doll collection. They sat innocently on their shelf, lifeless and normal-sized. I should have felt relieved, but something nagged at the back of my mind. One of the dolls, a particularly creepy Victorian-style one, had always faced the bedroom door. But now it was turned towards me, its painted eyes seeming to follow my every move. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the nightmare had just shaken me up. But as I backed out of the room, I could have sworn I saw its tiny porcelain hand twitch. Now I sit here typing this out, trying to convince myself it was all just a dream, but I can't shake this feeling of being watched. And every time I close my eyes, I see that faceless demon hear its chilling whisper.
"They're waiting for you, Sarah. They're always waiting."
I don't know if I'm awake or still trapped in some kind of nightmare. All I know is I'm afraid to fall asleep again, because who knows what will be waiting for me in the dark. The previous owners of my new home all went insane. I think I know why. I never believed in ghosts. That is, until I moved into 42 Willow Street. It started with whispers. Faint, unintelligible murmurs that I blamed on the old pipes or the wind. But as I sit here, alone in the darkness, my back pressed against the cold wall of my bedroom closet, I know better. The house is alive, and it wants me gone. 3 weeks ago, I was just Mike, an ordinary guy with an ordinary office job who'd finally saved up enough for a down payment on his first house. The real estate agent's eyes had shifted nervously when I asked about the property's history, but I was too excited about the bargain price to care. If only I'd known. The first night, I chalked up my unease to new surroundings. The second night, I blamed the creaks and groans on the house settling. But by the third night, when my bedroom door slammed shut on its own, I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was wrong. I tried to rationalize it. I'm an analyst, for crying out loud. Numbers, logic, that's my world. But how do you explain shadows that move against the light? Or the putrid smell of decay that comes and goes? Or the child's laughter echoing through empty rooms? At first, it was subtle. That I'd come home from work to find things slightly out of place. My coffee mug on the other side of the kitchen counter. The TV remote on the floor instead of the coffee table. Small things easy to dismiss. But then it escalated. One evening, I was cooking dinner when every cabinet in the kitchen flew open simultaneously, dishes clattering to the floor. I stood there, frozen, surrounded by shattered porcelain, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I did my research, poring over old newspaper archives. That's when I found out about the Millers. In 1954, John Miller murdered his wife and 3 children before taking his own life. Right here, in this house. The articles described a man driven mad by unseen forces, rambling about voices in the walls and evil seeping through the floorboards. I dug deeper, spending nights hunched over my laptop, chasing leads. I discovered that before the Millers, the house had belonged to a reclusive widow rumored to practice black magic. And before her, a family had abandoned the property suddenly, leaving everything behind. The pattern stretched back to the house's construction in 1887, a trail of tragedy and unexplained disappearances. I told myself it was just a series of unfortunate coincidences, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But then the dream started. And vivid nightmares of a family fleeing through these very halls, chased by a lumbering figure with a bloodied axe. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, sheets twisted around me, heart pounding. Sometimes, in that hazy space between sleep and waking, I'd see figures at the foot of my bed, a woman with a gash across her throat, children with hollow eyes, a man with a twisted grin and an axe in his hand. The lack of sleep began to affect my work. I'd zone out during meetings, jump at every sudden noise. My coworkers started to whisper, shooting concerned glances my way. But I couldn't tell them the truth. Who'd believe me? Last night, things escalated beyond my worst nightmares. I was working late, poring over spreadsheets, when my laptop screen went black. In its reflection, I saw a face, gaunt eyes sunken, mouth twisted in a silent scream. I whirled around, but there was nothing there. When I turned back, my screen was normal, except for 7 words typed in a blank document. Get out before he makes you stay forever. I laughed it off, blaming my overactive imagination and lack of sleep. But an hour later, as I headed to bed, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on the hallway wall, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight, was a handprint. A small, child-sized handprint made of what looked horribly like blood. My rational mind grasping for explanations, I approached the wall. The handprint was wet, glistening in the pale light. I reached out, my own hand trembling, and touched it. It was warm. And as my fingers made contact, I heard a child's giggle right behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat, but The hallway was empty. When I turned back to the wall, the handprint was gone. No trace, not even a smudge. I ran to the bathroom, splashing water on my face, telling myself I was seeing things. But when I looked in the mirror, it wasn't my reflection staring back. It was John Miller's face, twisted in that same manic grin I'd seen in the old newspaper photos. His mouth opened, impossibly wide, and a sound like 1,000 screaming souls poured out. I stumbled backward, tripping over the bathroom rug and crashing to the floor. When I looked up, my reflection was normal again. But now I could hear it, whispers coming from inside the walls. Dozens of voices, pleading, screaming, laughing. They were saying my name.
Mike, join us. You belong here now, Mike.
I scrambled to my feet and ran, not caring where, just needing to escape those voices. And I found myself stuck in the study, surrounded by the books and papers from my research into the house's history. And there, on my desk, was something I knew hadn't been there before, an old, leather-bound journal. With shaking hands, I opened it. It was John Miller's diary. So the entries started normally enough, a man excited about his new home. But as I flipped through the pages, I watched his descent into madness unfold in scrawled, frantic handwriting. He wrote about the whispers, the moving shadows, the children's laughter, about how the house showed him things, horrible things, about what he would become, about how he tried to leave, tried to get his family out, but the house wouldn't let them go. The last entry chilled me to my core. I understand now. It's not just a house. It's hungry. It needs us. And if I don't feed it, it will never stop. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. As I read those final words, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath frosted in the air. And then I felt it, a hand on my shoulder, ice cold and unyielding. I don't remember how I got to the closet. All I know is that I'm here now, huddled in the dark, listening to heavy footsteps in the hallway. They're getting closer. The doorknob is turning. And I'm beginning to understand why John Miller did what he did. The door's opening. I can see a shadow looming, axe in hand. And I realize, with a clarity that threatens to shatter my sanity, that it's not just John Miller's ghost haunting this house. It's all of them. Every victim, every killer. Trapped. Hungry. Waiting. God help me. I think I'm next. The house is chosen, and it won't let me leave. As the closet door swings open, I know I have a choice to make. Will I become the next victim? Or the next killer? The axe gleams in the darkness, and I reach out my hand. I thought I was alone in the house, until I heard it coming down from the attic. I was 15 the night I heard it. You know, that sound, the one that makes every inch of your skin tighten, like your body already knows something's wrong before your mind catches up. I thought it was the wind at first, or maybe the old pipes creaking above. So it was an old house, after all. But when I heard it again, a shuffle heavier than a rat but too light for anything that should be up there, I knew I wasn't alone. It's funny. I wasn't the kind of kid who scared easily. Horror movies, I loved them. Creepy stories, bring it on. But that night, that was different. The kind of different that sticks with you. I stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, staring up into the dark. Every instinct told me to just walk away, go back to watching TV, and pretend like nothing happened. But that noise, it wasn't stopping. Something was moving up there. Something alive. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, not because I was scared. At least, that's what I told myself. I just needed to check, get it over with. As I climbed the steps, the air got colder, thicker. The kind of cold that makes your breath hang in the air, even though it was the middle of summer. The attic door creaked open, slow, like whatever was up there had been waiting. My flashlight cut through the darkness, and for a second, it seemed like nothing was wrong. Just dusty boxes, old furniture, the usual attic junk. But then I saw it. A shadow darting between the stacks, too quick for me to make out clearly. My heart pounded, but I still told myself it was just a raccoon or something. I mean, what else could it be, right? Then I heard it. A low, guttural growl, like something warning me to stay away. And that's when I saw its eyes. Yellow, gleaming in the dark. Animalistic, but not in a way that made sense. It was too big, too twisted. It moved on all fours, but its limbs were wrong, too long and thin, like it had been stretched into something unnatural. I froze. It was searching for something. I could feel it. Not me, not food, but something else. It rifled through the boxes with an almost frantic energy, growling every time it came up empty. It took me a second to realize the creature wasn't paying attention to me. Not yet, anyway. It was tearing through old boxes, scattering dust and papers everywhere. Whatever it was looking for, it was desperate. My brain screamed at me to get out, but there was this morbid curiosity that kept me frozen, like I needed to understand what it was doing. I took a step forward, just enough for the flashlight beam to hit an old wooden trunk near the back wall. That's when the creature stopped, head snapping towards the chest like it finally found what it had been searching for. My heart was in my throat as it crept closer. The sound of its claws scraping against the floorboards made my skin crawl. It hovered over the trunk, its breath coming in ragged gasps. Almost excited? I had no idea what was in that chest. My parents always said it belonged to the house's previous owners, some old family that disappeared years ago. I never gave it much thought. Just another spooky story to make the place feel older than it was. But now, watching that thing zero in on it, I knew it wasn't just some forgotten piece of furniture. Suddenly, the creature let out a shriek, a sound that sliced through the quiet like broken glass. It slammed its claws into the trunk, splintering the wood like it was nothing. I didn't stick around to see what happened next. I bolted for the door, nearly falling down the attic stairs. As I reached the bottom, I heard something else. Whispers, faint, like they were coming from inside the walls, calling my name. They were growing louder, chasing me. Whatever that thing was, whatever it had found, it was tied to this house. And now it wasn't just the attic anymore. It was everywhere. I thought I was safe when I reached the bottom of the stairs, but the whispers followed me. They swirled around me, rising in a frantic chorus, words I couldn't understand but somehow felt deep in my bones. I needed to get out of the house, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like the whole place was alive, holding me there. So then, I heard it. The creak of wood behind me. The thing was coming down from the attic. I whipped around, and there it was, dragging that chest behind it with one clawed hand. Its eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a coldness seep into my chest. A fear so raw, it made my heart pound so loud I thought it would explode. The creature was no longer searching. It had found what it wanted, and now it was coming for me. It flung the chest open, and I caught a glimpse of what was inside. A tarnished, silver pendant, half buried in old letters. I didn't know why, but I knew it was important. This creature had been after that pendant all along. Something terrible had happened in this house long before my family moved in. Something tied to that pendant. And now it was awake again. The creature lunged, faster than I thought something that big could move. I barely dodged, tripping over a chair as it smashed into the wall, shaking the house. I scrambled to my feet, but it was already on me, its hot breath against the back of my neck. Its claws dug into the floorboards as I ran for the door, and just as I reached for the handle, I felt a sharp tug at my leg. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of me. I could feel its claws wrapping around my ankle, dragging me back toward that chest, toward the attic, toward whatever fate the house had waiting for me. But just as quickly as it grabbed me, it stopped. The creature froze, staring past me, its yellow eyes wide, almost afraid. I twisted around to see what it was looking at, and there, standing in the hallway, was a shadow. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. The whispers were louder now, overlapping, and the creature let out a low, guttural growl before releasing me. I bolted, running faster than I ever had in my life, and didn't stop until I was miles from the house. I never went back. My parents said they found the attic destroyed, but no sign of the creature. No one ever talked about the chest or the pendant again. But every so often, in the dead of night, I still hear those whispers. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever happened in that house, it's not over. What I discovered in my grandma's basement changed me forever. I always hated that basement. Even as a kid, there was something off about it, like it didn't belong in the house. The air down there felt heavy, like it was watching you. But this time, something was different. There was a door. A door I swear I'd never seen before. It was tucked away in the far corner, almost like it had been waiting for me to notice. But how could I not have seen it? I'd been in this house 100 times before. But that door, it wasn't there. It couldn't have been. I was only supposed to house sit for Grandma while she visited her sister. Easy job, right? Water the plants, feed the cat, stay out of trouble. But this door started whispering. Not words, exactly. More like feelings. Unease, fear. And the more I stared at it, the louder it got. The handle felt cold, too cold for a basement that had always been warm. My brain screamed to turn around to go back upstairs, but my hand had other plans. I twisted the knob and yanked it open. Nothing. Just a dark, narrow hallway that definitely shouldn't have fit behind that wall. And I stepped inside, and that's when the cracks started. Not in the walls. No, those stayed intact. It was my mind. I could hear the house breathing, the floorboards creaking under invisible footsteps. Shadows seemed to crawl along the edges of the hallway, whispering secrets in a language I didn't understand but somehow knew. By the time I reached the end of the hallway, I was sweating. My head pounded like it was being squeezed by something I couldn't see. And that's when I realized. Grandma knew. She always knew about this door. She told me not to go downstairs, that the basement wasn't safe. But I thought it was just old lady paranoia. But this wasn't normal. No, this was something else. Something. Alive. The walls twisted, the ground buckled beneath my feet. I turned around to run back, but the hallway had stretched. The door was a pinprick of light in the distance now, impossible to reach. And my legs felt heavy, like I was wading through thick mud. And with every step, the whispers got louder. They started making sense now, telling me things. Things about Grandma. Things about the house. And worst of all, things about me. And then, the hallucinations kicked in. First, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, seeing shadows where there weren't any. No, there were faces in those shadows, watching, laughing. And then, they started moving. I stumbled, hands gripping the walls, but the hallway seemed to pulse beneath my touch, like it was alive, breathing in sync with my panic. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Grandma's name flashed on the screen. I answered, barely able to form words.
You went into the basement, didn't you?
Grandma's voice on the phone was flat, but there was something underneath, a tremor, like she knew exactly what I'd done, but was hoping she was wrong. I didn't know about the door. I stammered, backing away from the shadows as they swayed, their faces melting into the walls. Grandma was silent on the other end for a long moment, and I could hear nothing but the dull hum of my heart in my ears. Finally, she spoke, quieter this time.
It wasn't supposed to happen like this. You were never supposed to find it.
Her words sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean? How long has it been here?
A long time. Longer than you'd think.
Her voice cracked slightly, like she was on the verge of telling me something she had buried for years.
You need to leave the house. Now.
I laughed, a short, crazed sound. Leave? You want me to leave after finding? After seeing this?
I told you never to go into the basement. I warned you.
She said, and for a second, I swore I heard her voice tremble.
That door, it's not just a door. It's something else. Something older than us.
She hung up, and the line went dead. The walls felt closer now, closing in like the hallway was tightening around me. I turned back, and that's when I noticed it. The door wasn't there anymore. The way out was gone. Panic clawed at my chest, my breath quickening. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be real. My mind raced, trying to find logic, but it was slipping like water through my fingers. Every corner I turned, I ended up in the same dark hallway, the same cold, suffocating space. And the whispers grew louder, turning from a dull hum into words, frantic, accusing words. They hissed things about Grandma, things about the house's past that I'd never known. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block them out, but it was no use. They were inside my head. So the floor shifted beneath me, creaking, twisting like it was alive. I fell, hands slamming against the cold ground, but when I looked up, I wasn't in the hallway anymore. And I was in the living room, Grandma's living room. Except it wasn't. The furniture was wrong. So the walls seemed to shimmer like a mirage, flickering between what I knew and something much older, much darker. Grandma was standing by the window, her back to me. "Grandma?" My voice cracked, fear gripping me. She didn't turn around.
I tried to keep it hidden.
She said softly, her voice carrying an eerie calm.
I really did. But the house, it has a way of showing itself to those who shouldn't see.
"What are you talking about?" I demanded, my frustration boiling over as I got to my feet. "What's going on?" She sighed, finally turning to face me. Her eyes were distant, like she was looking past me, through me.
That door, it doesn't lead anywhere. It shows you things. Things you're not supposed to know. Things the house has seen.
"Why didn't you tell me?" I shouted, stepping toward her, but the moment I did, the room shifted again. So the walls twisted, bending in ways that made no sense, and Grandma. She wasn't Grandma anymore. She laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed in my head. Her face began to shift, morphing into something else. Something ancient, with eyes that saw too much, lips that whispered secrets only the dead should know. I stumbled back, heart racing. The room swayed, and I grabbed a nearby chair to steady myself. It felt solid, real. For a moment, I clung to that normalcy, pushing back against the wave of madness crashing around me. "Grandma, please." I called, desperate. "This isn't funny." But her laughter echoed back, hollow and chilling. The shadows in the corners of the room twisted and danced, whispering my name, calling me deeper into the chaos. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block them out, but they slipped into my mind like poison.
Why did you have to go looking?
Grandma's voice echoed in my head, each syllable dripping with a mixture of disappointment and sadness.
You should have listened. It's too late now.
I shook my head, forcing myself to breathe. I had to stay grounded. This was just the house, just the shadows. I could handle this. I had to. And opening my eyes, I found myself back in the hallway, the door looming ahead of me like a gaping maw. It felt alive, pulsating, inviting me in. I wanted to turn away, but my feet moved on their own, drawn to it, as if it were a magnet. "Don't," I shouted, trying to pull back, but the whisper surged. My mind was awash in images, flashes of Grandma, her warnings, her fear. And I could see her old journals, pages filled with frantic scribbles about the door. I could feel the weight of her secrets pressing down on me. "This is your fault," I yelled, the shadows mocking me. "You brought me here."
Did I?
Grandma's voice whispered from the dark corners, her tone impossibly calm.
Or did you find your way here all on your own? This has been waiting for you.
I stumbled forward, grasping at the wall to steady myself. My mind raced with thoughts, fragments of clarity cutting through the fog. This door didn't just lead to insanity, it was a mirror. It reflected all my fears, all my insecurities. "Stop," I screamed, collapsing to the ground. I pressed my palms against my eyes, willing the visions away, but they came anyway. Images of me as a child, afraid of the dark, alone in my room. Memories of Grandma tucking me in, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't place back then, something ancient, filled with a wisdom she never shared. As I fought through the memories, I realized I was losing grip on my sense of self. And the shadows were morphing into faces. My face, twisted with fear and anger. It was me, but not me. "What are you?" I gasped, choking on the fear that gripped my throat.
Just a part of you.
They hissed, a chorus of voices wrapped around me.
You can't escape what you truly are.
And in that moment of realization, I saw the door again, its handle glinting with promise and dread. I understood. It was a threshold, not just to the basement, but to my own mind. A path to the parts of myself I had buried. The fears that Grandma had tried to protect me from had festered, taking root in my psyche. I staggered to my feet, heart pounding. I had to confront it, confront what lay beyond. Not the door itself, but what it represented. The chaos, the fear, the madness waiting to pull me under. So with a deep breath, I stepped closer. "I'm not afraid of you," I declared, even as my voice trembled. "You can't control me." The whispers swelled, and the darkness thickened, but I pushed forward. I wasn't just facing the door. I was reclaiming my narrative. I was no longer just Grandma's grandson. I was me, and I refused to be defined by fear. So the shadows shrieked, a cacophony of rage, but I held my ground. The door trembled, as if sensing my resolve. It wasn't just an exit, it was a confrontation. And with each heartbeat, I chipped away at the insanity that threatened to engulf me. "Enough." I yelled, the word ringing out like a bell, cutting through the chaos. The door shuddered, light spilling from the cracks, revealing glimpses of warmth and normalcy just beyond it. And then, in an instant, it was gone. The hallway shifted back into the basement, empty and dark, the door nowhere to be found. I was left panting, sweat drenching my shirt, but I was still me. The weight in my chest lightened. I turned back, ready to face whatever came next. And the shadows still lingered, but they no longer held power over me. I was free. The kid I babysat wasn't alone. Something lurked inside him. I never believed in anything supernatural. Ghosts, demons, possessions. Those were just stories meant to scare children. But that night changed everything. When I pulled up to the semi-modern house in the middle of nowhere, a chill slithered down my spine. It wasn't the dark, quiet surroundings that unsettled me. It was the knowing smile of the mother as she handed me the keys.
"He can be a handful, but I trust you,"
she said, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. Her 5-year-old son, Tommy, was already peeking around the corner. With shaggy hair and white eyes, he looked like any other kid, but something felt off. Maybe it was the way he giggled when I entered, or how he wouldn't meet my gaze. "What, are you ready to have fun?" I asked, forcing a smile. His grin widened, but it felt like he was sizing me up instead. And after his parents left, the house was engulfed in an eerie stillness. I attempted to entertain Tommy with toys and cartoons, but he just sat there, motionless, staring at me. "What do you want to play?" I asked, breaking the thick silence. He whispered something, but it was so quiet that I had to lean in closer. "Hide and seek," he said, his voice low and raspy. I chuckled nervously and agreed. As I counted to 20, the hairs on my neck prickled. I opened my eyes, calling out for Tommy, but the house was empty. I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Where could he possibly hide in this small place? He began searching, calling out his name, my heart pounding louder with every unanswered call. Then I heard it. A soft giggle, but it didn't sound like Tommy's. I followed the sound, and it led me to the basement door, slightly ajar. A voice, not quite Tommy's, echoed from within.
"Come play with me."
My stomach twisted. The darkness beyond the door seemed to beckon me closer. "Tommy?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. Summoning every ounce of courage, I pushed the door open and peered inside. The basement was cold, the air thick with an unsettling tension. I fumbled for the light switch, but the bulb flickered and died, leaving me in darkness. So then I saw him. Tommy stood at the far end, facing the wall. His back was to me, but something about his posture felt wrong. Too rigid, too still. "Tommy?" I whispered, a pit forming in my stomach. He slowly turned around, but his face was pale and expressionless, his eyes void of life.
"I want to show you something,"
he said, his voice deepening, echoing the strange resonance that sent chills down my spine. Before I could react, he darted past me, racing up the stairs. He chased after him, adrenaline pumping. "Tommy, wait," I shouted, but he was already in the living room, spinning in circles with a manic laugh. His laughter twisted into a high-pitched cackle that made my skin crawl. I grabbed him by the shoulders, trying to shake him back to reality. "Tommy, snap out of it. What's wrong with you?" He met my gaze, and for a moment I didn't see a child. Instead, I saw something ancient and malevolent, lurking just beneath the surface.
"He likes you,"
he whispered, a smirk creeping across his face. The room darkened as shadows danced along the walls. I felt a presence, something sinister weaving through the air, binding me in place. Panic surged through me. I was alone with this child, and whatever had taken hold of him. "Tommy, we need to leave," he yelled, but he just giggled, the sound echoing off the walls. The lights flickered, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. But I needed to get out, but the door felt miles away.
You can't leave.
But he said, his voice shifting to a deep growl.
You're mine now.
Desperation clawed at me as I turned and bolted for the front door. The shadow swirled around me, gripping at my ankles. He swung the door open, but a force pulled me back, slamming it shut just as I reached the threshold, and I remembered the basement. And the feeling that had washed over me earlier, the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, there was something in that darkness that could help. I took a deep breath and made my way back. I had to confront whatever was haunting Tommy, no matter the cost. Descending the stairs, I found the basement eerily still. I scanned the walls for anything out of place, anything that could explain the madness. That's when I spotted an old, dusty book on a shelf, its spine cracked and worn. With trembling hands, I opened it, revealing pages filled with cryptic symbols and dark rituals. One passage caught my eye. An incantation meant to exorcise a demon. "Tommy," I shouted, my voice reverberating in the quiet. And I could feel the malevolence pressing in on me, but I couldn't back down now. I began reciting the words, each syllable heavy with power and intent. The shadows flickered, and Tommy's voice pierced through the darkness.
Stop, he's my friend.
"No," I cried, pushing through the fear. "You don't know what you're saying." As I continued the incantation, the air grew colder, the walls vibrating with energy. Suddenly, the room erupted with chaos. Tommy screamed, his small frame shaking, as if battling an invisible force. I pressed on, the words spilling from my lips, drowning out his cries. I felt the shadows twist and contort around me, their grip loosening as the light began to break through. With one final utterance, I shouted the last line, and a blinding flash filled the room. The shadows shattered like glass, and a deafening silence followed. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. When I finally dared to look up, Tommy lay still, his eyes closed. I rushed to him, checking for any sign of life. "Tommy," I whispered, fear gnawing at my insides. Slowly, his eyelids fluttered open, revealing the warmth of his familiar gaze.
"Anna?"
he asked, confusion written across his face. Relief flooded through me. "You're okay," I exclaimed, wrapping my arms around him. He hugged me tightly, the nightmare fading into a distant memory. So when his parents returned, I recounted the events, omitting the more disturbing details. They brushed it off as a vivid imagination, but I knew better. As I left that house, I glanced back one last time, shuddering at the thought of what lurked in the dark, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to walk through those doors. And there you have it. 5 terrifying tales of what happens when you're home alone, where silence isn't always safe. If these stories sent chills down your spine, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next time we venture into the unknown. Have a scary story of your own? Drop it in the comments below. Who knows, it might just be featured in a future video. Until next time, stay safe. And remember, sometimes the scariest things happen when you think you're alone.